Life can change in an instant. Jonathan found a little girl on his doorstep, his daughter he never knew about. Watch his journey from shock to love, facing challenges he never expected. Subscribe and turn on notifications to follow this powerful story. It was supposed to be just another night, or rather, an important one. Jonathan Carrington adjusted the cuff of his white dress shirt and gave himself one last glance in the hallway mirror. The black tuxedo hugged his athletic frame, and his hair was neatly styled. The driver would arrive in 5 minutes to take him downtown for the launch gala of his new real estate firm. Everything had to be perfect. He picked up his phone, checking the time again. 6:17 p.m. As he stepped toward the front door of his large modern house, tucked away behind tall hedges in an affluent Los Angeles neighborhood, he barely heard the soft rustle on the porch. He opened the door and froze. There was a cardboard box sitting squarely on the stone steps, and inside it, curled up, wide-eyed, trembling, was a little black girl. She looked no older than 3, maybe younger. 2 messy puffs tied on either side of her head. Her face was streaked with tears, cheeks flushed. She clutched a small, tattered elephant plush toy. Jonathan's breath caught. For a second, neither of them moved. Then the girl blinked up at him. "Mister, are you the man?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper. He crouched down, his mind racing. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" The girl didn't answer. She just looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. That's when he saw it, tucked into the folds of her too big pink jacket, barely visible, a white envelope with his name scrawled across the front in hurried handwriting. Jonathan. His fingers trembled as he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You said you'd call. You didn't. And now I can't do this anymore. This is your daughter. Her name is Nia. She deserves better than I can give. Don't hate me. She needs someone stable. She needs you. No name. No return address. Just that." Jonathan staggered back and sat heavily on the step, the paper fluttering in his hand. "Daughter? What kind of sick joke was this?" "Sir." The voice in his earpiece made him jump, his assistant. "The car is waiting. Are you on your way?" He stood slowly, glanced down at Nia, who was now sucking her thumb quietly, still huddled in the box, and replied, "Cancel the meeting." "You what?" "Jonathan, this is the gala." "Just cancel it," he said, and hung up. Inside, he wrapped Nia in a soft throw blanket and gave her water. She sat on the edge of his white leather couch, barely moving. He tried asking her questions, but she was too scared, too confused. "Do you remember your mommy's name?" he asked gently. Nia nodded but didn't speak. He tried again. "Did she tell you anything before she brought you here?" She stared at him, blinking hard, like she was fighting sleep. "She said you'd take care of me." Jonathan felt a strange ache in his chest. It didn't make sense. He hadn't seen anyone seriously in years. The last woman of color he dated was, maybe 4 years ago? She was a grad student, brilliant, sharp-witted. They'd met at a startup pitch night, and he'd promised to call. He never did. Could that really be her? He placed a call to his lawyer. No answer. Then he called his doctor and scheduled a DNA test for the next morning. No delays. He didn't sleep. That night, as the house fell silent and the rain outside began to patter against the windows, he watched the little girl finally curl up on his couch and drift into sleep, her small hand gripping the elephant. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Carrington didn't feel in control. The morning light crept slowly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jonathan's living room, warming the edges of his expensive furniture and illuminating the surreal reality unfolding before him. On the couch, still asleep, lay the little girl, Nia. She had kicked off the blanket sometime during the night, and her tiny foot rested against a cushion that probably cost more than her entire outfit. Her curls were messy, her thumb back in her mouth. Jonathan hadn't slept. Instead, he sat in a chair across from her all night, watching, thinking, remembering. Was it really possible? Had he once said something, done something that led to this? He vaguely remembered her now. Maya. They had met at a mixer in Venice Beach. She was a law student, working part-time at a nonprofit. He liked her confidence, her quiet fire. They went on 3 dates. He told her he'd call. He never did. She disappeared from his life as easily as she entered. And now this. At 9 a.m. sharp, his physician, Dr. Bryant, arrived at the house, carrying a discreet DNA collection kit and wearing a puzzled expression. Jonathan introduced Nia, who stared at the doctor like he was a cartoon character, and explained the situation as best he could without sounding entirely insane. "She was dropped off last night. The note said she's mine." Dr. Bryant raised an eyebrow. And you believe it? Jonathan exhaled. I don't know, but I need to find out. The DNA swabs were quick. Nia sat patiently on his lap as the doctor took gentle samples from inside her cheek. She squirmed a little but didn't cry. Bryant sealed the kit and stood. I'll have results in 3 to 5 days, he said. In the meantime, you might want to prepare. Emotionally. Jonathan didn't reply. His mind was already elsewhere. The next 2 days were chaos, quiet, awkward chaos. He had postponed every meeting. His assistant, furious and confused, kept messaging him. Are you okay? You're missing the Tokyo call. Is this about a woman? He didn't respond to most of them. Instead, he took Nia shopping. She needed everything: clothes, shoes, a proper car seat. At first, she clung to his hand tightly in the store, wary of every stranger. But then something changed. She smiled at a soft purple dress with tiny sparkles. He bought 5. She laughed out loud when he let her pick a pair of glittery sneakers. He bought 2. They stopped at a park on the way home, and she insisted on feeding ducks with bread he didn't know he had in his trunk. She climbed into his lap afterward and whispered, You're not mean like Mommy said. Jonathan's heart dropped. She said I was mean? Nia nodded. Only at first. But then she said, Maybe you'd be nice if you saw me. He looked away, blinking back something unfamiliar. That evening, while she napped upstairs, Jonathan sat in his home office, staring at the note again. She deserves better than I can give. Where was Maya now? What had happened that led her to make such a desperate choice? And why hadn't she told him anything sooner? He started calling hospitals, shelters, even tracked down the nonprofit Maya once worked for, but no one had heard from her in over a year. It was like she vanished. On the 3rd day, the call came. Dr. Bryant's voice was calm, steady. The results are in. Jonathan swallowed hard. And a pause. It's a match. 99.9%. She's your biological daughter, Jonathan. The words hung in the air. He didn't speak. He simply lowered the phone, walked quietly to the staircase, and looked up toward the bedroom where Nia was playing with her new toys. His daughter. His. Jonathan stared at his phone long after the call ended. His hands trembled slightly, resting on the polished kitchen counter. The words echoed in his mind again and again. She's your biological daughter. He expected to feel something specific, maybe panic, maybe joy, maybe regret. But what came instead was a heavy, strange calm, as if something inside him had clicked into place, whether he was ready or not. He walked upstairs and paused outside the guest room. Nia was inside, humming quietly, arranging tiny toy animals in a row on the bed. She had changed into the purple sparkly dress she loved so much, her curls bouncing as she played. He knocked gently. She looked up and grinned. You're back. He stepped in. I never left, kiddo. She giggled and held up a stuffed giraffe. This one's Daddy now. Jonathan knelt down beside her. That's a good name. He studied her small fingers, the way she gently moved each toy, the careful way she built her own world. He still didn't know how to be a father. But somehow, right here in this moment, he didn't want to be anything else. Later that night, he stood in his bedroom, staring at the mirror. His own father had left when he was 6. He barely remembered the man, only the echo of absence, forgotten birthdays, his mom crying behind closed doors, and the feeling that no one was coming to fix anything. Jonathan had spent his whole life building walls. Control, wealth, success, they were all armor. Nothing could surprise him. Nothing could shake him. Until now. Until her. Over the next week, Jonathan began reshaping his life. He hired a part-time nanny named Rosa, a kind middle-aged woman with a background in early childhood education, who immediately fell in love with Nia's bright spirit. He converted his home office into a playroom, filled with books, a small tent, puzzles, and paints. The walls that had once been hung with real estate awards now held paper butterflies and finger paintings. He even started waking up earlier, not for calls, not for markets, but to braid tiny curls into messy ponytails before daycare. He was still terrible at it. But every night, after story time, when she whispered, "Good night, Daddy," and reached for his hand, the world made more sense. And yet, there was a shadow, one he couldn't ignore. Where was Maya? He called shelters again, contacted a friend who worked in social services, even reached out to a private investigator. Nothing. Each dead end made the guilt twist tighter in his stomach. Had she been homeless? Sick? Scared? What if he could have helped and didn't? One evening, Jonathan sat on the back patio after Nia had fallen asleep. The lake behind his home reflected the fading sky. It was quiet. He held the note again. The only piece of her mother he had. You said you'd call. You didn't. He whispered aloud. I'm sorry. Not because he was caught. Not because things had turned complicated. But because she had been right to expect better from him. The next morning, a letter arrived. Not in the mailbox. It had been slid under his front door. No postage, no cinder. Just a folded sheet of notebook paper. He opened it slowly. She's safe. I couldn't take care of her anymore, but I couldn't let her go into the system. I knew you were stable. Rich. You'd never need anyone. Maybe that's why I hated you. Tell her I love her. But don't look for me. M. His fingers trembled. The handwriting was familiar now. She was out there. Watching. He didn't know if he'd ever see Maya again. But that night, when Nia fell asleep on his chest with one hand clutching her giraffe, he made a quiet vow. She would never feel unwanted again. The days turned into weeks. Jonathan began to learn rhythms he never thought would apply to his life: daycare pickups, bedtime meltdowns, small victories like tying shoes correctly or cutting grapes the right way. At work, he scaled back. His assistant, Blake, was baffled. You missed the investors' brunch, he said one morning, holding a steaming espresso in one hand and a calendar in the other. Again, Jonathan didn't look up from his phone. He was showing Nia a cartoon hedgehog that sang the alphabet. I've got other priorities right now. Blake frowned. You mean her? Jonathan looked him straight in the eyes. Yeah, her. It shut Blake up. But not everyone in Jonathan's life adjusted as easily. His mother, wealthy, sharp-tongued, and very much a product of her country club circle, came to visit on a Saturday afternoon. She hadn't seen her son in weeks and insisted on dropping by just for tea. When she walked in and saw Nia coloring in the kitchen, she froze. Jonathan had told her over the phone, but it clearly hadn't sunk in. She's really yours? She said, blinking. Yes, Mom. This is Nia. His mother gave a tight smile and crouched down stiffly. Hello, darling. Nia didn't answer. She stared at the woman's pearls and then looked back at her coloring book. Jonathan scooped her up protectively. She's shy. His mother stood, brushing invisible dust from her blouse. Well, this is certainly unexpected. They sat in the living room. Nia curled against Jonathan's side, listening quietly. His mother sipped her tea, then said, too brightly, You know, I'm sure there are agencies that could help. Nannies. Private schools. Boarding options even. Jonathan stiffened. She's not a problem to be managed. I didn't say she was. He leaned forward, voice steady. Then don't act like it. For once, his mother had nothing to say. That night, after his mother left, Nia asked, Why was that lady sad? Jonathan blinked. What do you mean? She looked at me like she wanted to cry. He hugged her tighter. Some people don't know how to be happy yet. That's not your fault. He started noticing it everywhere, at grocery stores, in restaurants, even in the park. The way people stared at them. A white man in a business suit pushing a black toddler on a swing. Some looked curious. Others confused. Some just suspicious. One woman even asked, too loudly, Is she adopted or stolen? Jonathan didn't answer. He just walked away. But it stayed with him, how the world still needed a label for something that simply was. One day, during drop-off at daycare, a staff member stopped him. Mr. Carrington? Do you have a moment? Jonathan tensed. She's fine, the woman reassured him quickly. One of the other parents asked if Nia's really yours. Jonathan's jaw tightened. I told them yes, and that it wasn't their business. But I thought you should know. He exhaled. Thanks. As he turned to leave, the woman added gently, She's a wonderful kid. And she's lucky to have you. He paused at the door. I'm the lucky one, he said. And he meant it. It was a rainy Tuesday when Nia got sick. It started with a small cough, barely noticeable. But by evening, she was warm to the touch, her breath shallow and fast, and her eyes glossy with exhaustion. Jonathan panicked. He bundled her into his arms and drove straight to the pediatric urgent care, cutting through traffic like it was war. By the time they arrived, she was whimpering softly, her forehead pressed against his chest. The nurse took one look at them and hesitated. Is she yours? The woman asked cautiously. Jonathan didn't blink. She's my daughter. Her name is Nia Carrington. She's 3. The nurse blinked once, then nodded. This way. They sat in the sterile exam room for nearly an hour. Jonathan held her close, rocking gently, whispering stories about animals that lived in the clouds. When the doctor finally came in, he confirmed it was a virus, nothing too dangerous, but enough to make a toddler miserable. She needs rest, fluids, and lots of love, the doctor said with a small smile. We've got that, Jonathan replied. He carried Nia back into the house that night like she was made of glass. He didn't sleep, again, just watched her breathe, her tiny chest rising and falling in time with the rain tapping against the window. She murmured in her sleep once, barely audible, "Daddy, stay." His heart broke and mended all at once. By morning, she was better. Groggy, but smiling. She drank apple juice and demanded cartoons. Jonathan sat beside her with a laptop on his knees and canceled another investor call. His phone vibrated, a message from Blake. "You're tanking the Tokyo deal." He replied simply. "Let it tank." Over the following days, the bond between them grew deeper. Jonathan began reading parenting books at night, taking mental notes during conversations with other parents at daycare, even calling Rosa for tips. He learned that Nia hated peanut butter but loved mango slices, that she got overwhelmed when more than 3 people spoke at once, that she liked to sleep with the hallway light on, and that lullabies only worked if sung very, very softly. He also learned something about himself, something that had been missing all these years, a quiet sense of purpose. One evening, Nia sat on his lap holding a picture book, turning the pages slowly. She pointed to an illustration of a brown bear and its cub walking through the woods. "Daddy, that's us," she said. Jonathan smiled. "You think so?" "Yeah. You're big and strong and I'm little, but we go together." He blinked, swallowed hard, hugged her tighter. "Yeah, baby girl. We go together." But even as life settled into a new kind of normal, the world outside didn't change. People still stared. Some still asked rude questions. One night, after picking her up from daycare, a woman approached him in the parking lot. "You shouldn't pretend to be her father," she said coldly. "It confuses children, and it confuses people like me." Jonathan stood frozen for a moment. Then he looked down at Nia, who was clutching his leg, confused and a little scared. He bent down and kissed the top of her head. "She's not confused," he said softly. "She knows exactly who I am." He didn't wait for a response. He just took Nia's hand and walked away. It had been almost 2 months since the night he found the box on his doorstep. 2 months of adjusting schedules, learning bedtime songs, navigating daycare politics, and answering far too many questions from strangers who couldn't comprehend the obvious, that a little black girl and a white man could be a real family. But now Jonathan faced a different kind of challenge, one that couldn't be solved with bedtime stories or mango slices. Legal custody. He wasn't her legal guardian. Not yet. It was Rosa, his nanny, who raised the issue one afternoon. They were sitting in the kitchen, Nia asleep upstairs. "You should talk to a lawyer," she said gently, stirring her tea. "She needs to be protected." Jonathan rubbed his temples. "Protected from what?" "From the system," she said simply. "If something happens, an accident, a question from a hospital, a nosy cop, and you're not on paper as her father, they could take her away." That thought hadn't even occurred to him. It stopped his breath cold. The next morning, he called in a favor from an old friend, Andrew Lee, a top family lawyer in the city. They met in Jonathan's home office, which now had a basket of stuffed animals in one corner and a rainbow crayon drawing taped to the door labeled Daddy's Room. Andrew, meticulous as ever, adjusted his glasses and said, "The DNA test helps. But it's not enough." "What do I have to do?" Jonathan asked. "We'll need to petition the court for full legal custody. Ideally, Maya would sign papers voluntarily. But if she can't be found?" "She doesn't want to be found." Andrew sighed. "Then it's abandonment. You'll need to prove that she left the child with you permanently and hasn't made an effort to reclaim her. She left a letter. That helps. But we'll need more. Records, statements, timelines." Jonathan nodded. "Whatever it takes." In the evenings, after Nia went to sleep, he dug through memory. Old text with Maya, most deleted, old calendars, emails, bank statements, any sign that she had existed in his life, that Nia was not some random child dropped from the sky. He found one photo. A blurry shot from that night in Venice Beach, Maya in a black dress, laughing mid-sentence, and Jonathan standing next to her holding a drink. He stared at it for a long time, and wondered how everything had changed. A month later, they stood before a judge. It was a quiet courtroom. Jonathan wore a navy suit. Nia, in a pink dress with a white ribbon, sat on Rose's lap in the back. The judge, a tall woman with kind but stern eyes, read through the papers silently for several minutes. Jonathan's palms sweated. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Carrington, I've reviewed your documents. You've demonstrated not just paternity, but full-time care, financial support, and emotional responsibility for the child. in absence of the mother and with no objection filed. She paused, then smiled. The court grants you full legal custody of Nehemiah Carrington. Jonathan closed his eyes. Rosa clapped softly from the back, and when he turned around, Nia jumped into his arms. That night, he tucked her into bed and said gently, "You're officially mine now." She looked at him, confused. "I was already yours." He laughed. "Yeah, you were." But even with the paperwork in hand, not everything settled. Some questions began to grow in Jonathan's mind, ones he hadn't had time to consider before. What school would she go to? What would she ask one day about her mother? About her skin, and his? What kind of world was she growing up in, and was he prepared to help her face it? He didn't have the answers. But for once, he wasn't afraid to look for them. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Nia first asked about her mother. They were in the backyard, painting on a big sheet of craft paper taped to the patio floor. The sun was warm, the air smelled like lemons from the nearby tree, and Nia was swirling orange and green together into a wild jungle of messy color. Jonathan had just leaned back in his chair, smiling at her imagination, when she looked up and asked, "Where's my mommy?" He froze. She wasn't sad, just curious. Still, the question landed like a stone in his chest. He put down his brush slowly. "That's a really good question." Nia looked at him, waiting. He inhaled. "Your mommy, her name was Maya. She loved you very much. Where is she now?" "I don't know exactly. But before she left, she made sure you'd be safe. She brought you to me." Nia nodded, her eyes wide. "Was she nice?" "She was smart. And strong. And yes, she was nice." Nia paused. "Did she look like me?" Jonathan's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby. A lot like you." That seemed to satisfy her for now. She went back to painting. But Jonathan knew the question would return one day heavier, deeper. And next time, she might not be so easily soothed. That night, he sat in his office looking at the old photo again. Maya laughing, her eyes so alive. He wondered what she'd think now of the home Nia had, of the way he brushed her curls, of the giraffe lamp she insisted on keeping next to her bed. He wished she could see it. And he wished he had said something, anything, before she disappeared again. A few weeks later, he took Nia to a children's museum. They spent hours exploring. She climbed through tunnels, played with foam blocks, tried on costumes. At one point, she ran ahead and bumped into another child, a black girl about her age. The girl's mother came over, smiling, and helped them both up. She looked at Jonathan, then at Nia. Her smile faded. "Is she yours?" she asked. Jonathan was used to the question by now. "Yes," he said firmly. The woman didn't nod or smile. She just frowned, picked up her daughter, and walked away. Nia didn't notice. She was already busy chasing bubbles. But Jonathan stood there, rooted in place, thinking. That night, he called his old college friend Angela, a black woman raising two biracial kids with her partner. They hadn't spoken in years, but when she picked up, she sounded surprised and curious. "I need your help," he said honestly. Angela listened as he told the story, everything. From the box on the porch to the museum that morning. When he finished, she said, "I'm glad you called. I want to do this right," he said. "I want to raise her to be proud of who she is. But I know I don't know enough." Angela paused, then said gently, "You won't do it perfectly. But if you're willing to listen, to stay in her corner when it gets hard, that's already more than a lot of kids get." Jonathan exhaled. "Thank you. Start with books. Black authors. Black artists. Let her see herself in stories. Done. And get her around other kids, families who look like hers." "Okay." Angela paused again. "And one day, she's going to ask why her mommy left. Be honest. But don't ever let her think it was because she wasn't enough." Jonathan's chest ached. "She's more than enough," he said. "I know," Angela replied. "Make sure she does too." That night, Jonathan ordered 10 children's books. He called Rosa and asked her to help him find local community events. And when Nia woke up the next morning, there was a new book waiting on her nightstand. It had a little girl on the cover. A little girl who looked just like her. Summer came early that year. The days grew longer, brighter, and busier. Jonathan and Nia spent weekends at parks, lakes, community picnics. They planted vegetables in the backyard, even though Nia mostly just liked digging for worms. The house no longer felt sterile or silent. It echoed with laughter, sticky hands, the clatter of tiny shoes running down the hallway. But in quiet moments, Jonathan sometimes caught himself watching her too closely. Noticing the tilt of her head, the shape of her eyes, the way she furrowed her brow when thinking. How much of Maya is in her? How much is me? He knew her favorite color, green, her most hated food, mashed carrots, and the song that calmed her down, a lullaby in C major he'd learned to hum. But there were things he couldn't know yet, the kind of teenager she'd become, the words she might throw at him in anger one day, the identity she would one day shape and claim. And he knew, deep down, that at some point, the world would try to tell her she didn't belong. That test came sooner than expected. It was a Sunday. Jonathan had taken Nia to a children's art workshop at a local library. The instructor, a young white woman with a clipboard and an overly rehearsed smile, knelt down when they arrived. "Hi, sweetie," she said to Nia. "Is this your babysitter?" Jonathan blinked. Nia looked up, confused. "That's my daddy." The woman's smile faltered. "Oh, I just meant, he looks different than you." Jonathan didn't react. Not then. But he crouched down beside Nia and said quietly, so the instructor could hear too, "People will say strange things, baby. That doesn't make them right." Nia nodded slowly. They walked past the woman without another word. That evening, Jonathan sat down and wrote Nia a letter. She was only 3. She wouldn't understand it yet. But one day she would. "Dear Nia, if you're reading this, you're probably old enough to ask hard questions. I want you to know, from the first moment I saw you, you were mine. Not because of DNA. Not because a judge said so. But because I chose you. And I'll keep choosing you every single day. You are kind, brilliant, and strong. You don't have to be like me to be my daughter. You don't have to prove anything to belong. This world won't always see us clearly. But we see each other. And that's enough. I love you. Always. Dad." He folded it, placed it in a small envelope, and sealed it. He tucked it away in his desk drawer, just behind the photo of Maya laughing in Venice Beach. The next week, he brought Nia to her first Little Readers session at a local Black community center. The room was full of children who looked like her. She lit up instantly. Jonathan sat in the back, watching her engage, speak, share. One of the mothers came over and introduced herself. "You are Dad?" she asked. "I am." She nodded. "You're doing good, man. I can see it." Jonathan smiled. "Thanks. I'm trying." That night, he carried a sleepy Nia from the car to her bed. She was getting heavier, less baby, more girl. He knew there would come a time when she wouldn't fit in his arms like this anymore. But for now, she was here. Safe. His. He tucked her in and sat beside her for a long time, listening to her soft breathing. And he whispered to the dark, "I'll keep learning." For her. One morning in early fall, the letter arrived. It wasn't in a mailbox. It wasn't slipped under the door like the first one. It came by courier. Hand-delivered. Official-looking envelope. No return address. Jonathan almost didn't open it. But something in his gut told him he had to. Inside was a single page. Typewritten. No signature. "I never wanted to leave her. But I didn't know how to raise a child alone. Not in the life I had. I chose what I thought was safer. I watch her sometimes. From a distance. I see how she laughs with you. She's happy. Thank you for not turning your back on her like I was afraid you might. One day she'll ask. Tell her I loved her. M." Jonathan read it 3 times. Then once more. There was no contact information. No address. Nothing to trace. But it was Maya. He could feel it in the voice, in the careful shame behind the words. She was still out there. And watching. He didn't tell Nia right away. What would he say? "Your mom still exists, but she hides in the shadows like a ghost?" No. Not yet. Not until it made sense. That same week, daycare asked parents to bring baby photos for an All About Me wall. Jonathan froze. He didn't have any. No hospital photos. No baby footprints. No first birthday cake smeared on cheeks. He sat on the edge of his bed that night, photo album in his lap, empty pages mocking him. When Nia came in with her stuffed giraffe, asking for one more story, he pulled her onto his lap. "Nia," he said gently, "can I ask you something?" She looked up. "Okay. Do you remember anything about your mom? Even a little?" She tilted her head. "I remember she had a pretty scarf. And she used to sing songs, but not like you." Jonathan swallowed hard. "Do you miss her?" Nia shrugged. "Sometimes. But mostly I got you now." He held her close. "You always have me." Later that week, he took Nia to a photographer. "I want to start from now," he told them. "Let's make memories forward." The photos were beautiful. Candid shots of her laughing, twirling, hugging his leg. He printed one for her daycare wall. Underneath, he wrote, "Nia, 3 years old. Favorite color, green. Superpower, makes everything brighter." At home, Jonathan started building a new album. Page 1. The day we became official. Page 2. The first time she tied her own shoes. Page 3. The park day when she painted her hands and said it was her skin color rainbow. He would build her a childhood. Even if he hadn't been there for the start, he'd be there for every page from here. One night, he dreamed of Maya. She was standing at the edge of the lake behind the house, barefoot, hair blowing in the wind, watching Nia from afar. When he called out to her, she turned and smiled, sad, tired, but peaceful. "I didn't know how to stay," she said. He woke up with tears in his eyes. That morning, Nia crawled into bed beside him, curling up like a kitten. "Daddy," she whispered. "Do I look like my mommy?" Jonathan kissed the top of her head. "You look like someone strong. Just like her. Just like you." The months passed with the quiet steadiness of autumn leaves falling. Jonathan and Nia settled into their new rhythms, mornings filled with laughter over breakfast pancakes, afternoons spent at the park watching the leaves change, evenings telling stories by the fireplace. One crisp day, Jonathan held Nia's small hand as they walked to the community center, where Nia was starting preschool. She looked up at him with wide eyes, clutching her new backpack. "Daddy," she whispered, "will you be there?" He smiled down at her. Every step, baby girl. At the preschool, as she made new friends and learned new songs, Jonathan found himself smiling more freely than he had in years. The shadows of doubt and fear still lingered, questions about Maya, about the world's judgment, about what the future held. But they were quieter now, overshadowed by hope. One evening, as Jonathan tucked Nia into bed, she looked at him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "I love you." He kissed her forehead gently. "I love you more than anything." And as the stars flickered outside their window, Jonathan finally felt what he had been waiting for, a true beginning. Not just for Nia, but for both of them. The journey was far from over. There would be challenges, questions, and hard days ahead. But together, they were unstoppable.